Lord David Alton is next, but first, a Catholic priest and 6 others were killed by gunmen in an attack on St. Paul's Catholic Church in Nigeria on Tuesday. Father Ferdinand Ingubane had just offered Mass and was preparing to leave for the Holy Week Chrism Mass when he was shot in the head. The unidentified gunman also raided a nearby village, setting numerous homes ablaze. According to multiple media reports, Father Ferdinand, ordained in 2015, had served as an assistant priest at St. Paul's Parish since 2018, where he helped care for the many internally displaced people there. The murder comes days after another Nigerian priest was released after a week-long kidnapping by gunmen. May the souls of Father Ferdinand and all those victims rest in peace. What is the cost of speaking out against the Chinese Communist Party? On March 26th, 7 UK parliamentarians were sanctioned by the Communist Chinese government for speaking out against the regime and in support of persecuted religious minorities in China. My next guest is one of those sanctioned. He's written extensively about religious persecution, and he's been a long-time advocate for the voiceless. He's a life peer member of Parliament in the UK, and he joins us now from London. Welcome back to the program, my friend, Lord David Alton. David, so wonderful to see you. You were sanctioned by China for, quote, spreading lies and disinformation about the regime. What triggered the Communist Chinese government against you and the others at this moment?
Well, the specific thing is that last week I was one of those who pressed the UK government to impose sanctions on some of those who've been responsible for the atrocity crimes that have taken place in Xinjiang, where the Uyghur community live. I'm vice chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary Committee on the Uyghurs and indeed of the All-Party Group on Hong Kong. So I followed both of those issues and I've spoken out a great deal, but I've also been moving an amendment to one of our new acts of parliament, trying to place significant restrictions on trade with China and also opening a route to test whether or not it actually is a genocide that is underway in Xinjiang, something that the outgoing US administration and the incoming administration have both been agreed about, as has the Canadian Parliament, the Dutch Parliament, and others around the world. So more and more people are speaking out about this, and of course the Chinese Communist Party don't like it. So interestingly, Raymond, pretty well the first message I received was from my friend Sam Brownback, Ambassador Brownback, and he and another friend, Congressman Chris Smith, were both sanctioned for the same reasons just a few months ago.
That's right. You know, this is their routine. And you are barred under these sanctions from entering China or the territories or doing business with Chinese citizens or institutions. What does Beijing hope to accomplish with this, Lord Alton? Is the idea to shut you all up?
That's it entirely, Raymond. I think they hope we'll take Trappist vows and have nothing whatsoever to say in the future. And of course, that is a massive miscalculation. If anything, I mean, immediately I received an invitation to go and see our Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and I travelled down to London to see him on Saturday. Yesterday, I had a meeting with our Foreign Secretary and with my colleagues who have also been sanctioned, including Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, the former leader of the Conservative Party. And to start sanctioning people who simply have used their rights as parliamentarians to identify crimes against humanity, that tells you probably all that you need to know about the Chinese Communist Party. So I think actually this is counterproductive from their point of view. I think this will have opened the eyes of millions of people who've been sitting on the fence about this for too long.
You mentioned that Sunday meeting with Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He called you all warriors in the fight for free speech. And later he tweeted, "I spoke with some of those who've been shining a light on the gross human rights violations being perpetuated against Uyghur Muslims. I stand firmly with them and the other British citizens sanctioned by China." How important was that Prime Minister's public support of you and what you're doing on behalf of the Uyghurs and other communities?
Well, there's been some uncertainty about what the Prime Minister's view about China actually is. He's described himself as a China Sinophile, a friend of Chinese culture and Chinese people. Well, I guess I am too. I love China, I love Chinese people, and it's an extraordinary civilization. What was unclear was whether or not he was willing to take the kind of decisions that are necessary to start reducing the levels of trade and dependency which the United Kingdom has had on the Chinese Communist Party. A few months ago, I was
Mm,
one of those who was able to ensure that the Huawei deal didn't go ahead so that they wouldn't have even more access to our telecommunications infrastructure. It is
right.
crazy that one of our nuclear power stations at Hinkley Point is 1/3 owned by the Chinese Communist Party. If you want to ruin your country or put your country into the hands of an authoritarian regime, that's the way to go about it. So interestingly, I think that what they have done is has brought the Prime Minister out front, and his instincts would always be in favour of basic freedoms and liberty. And I think that the more that the battle lines are drawn in that way, the better it will be. You can't imagine Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan signing up for trade deals with the former Soviet Union. I mean, we used all the
Mm,
power we had, whether it was hard military power or soft power, through human rights approaches, through perestroika, glasnost, and all the rest, to bring about change. And in 1989, we saw the results of our efforts. And we've got to do the same with
yeah.
China. It is a threat to world freedom.
Yeah, we had Mike Pompeo earlier in the program, and he suggests we stop trading with China. That you can't trade with a regime like this when they're imprisoning people and have designs on imprisoning and taking over more territory outside of their borders. Some say that being such a public critic of Beijing belies respect, that it belies disrespect rather, and perhaps even hatred for the Chinese people. Your thoughts?
I think you're right, Raymond, to make the distinction between opposing the ideology of the Chinese Communist Party and a love for the people of China. It's a remarkable country. They are remarkable people, and terrible things are being done to them. I was part of a group
Hmm.
recently that put under the spotlight a report about forced organ harvesting for Falun Gong
Mm.
practitioners. I visited Western China and Tibet and seen what China has done in both places. And my first visit to China was back in the early 1980s when I visited Shanghai, where the remarkable Cardinal Kung had been in prison
Mm.
for 30 years. He'd been made a cardinal in secret in 1979 by St. John Paul II. Uh, but he had spent 30 years in prison and then 10 years under house arrest. Uh, this is the normal fate
Remarkable.
of people of religious belief in China, and we should be speaking out. The Uyghurs, Muslim Uyghurs, over 1 million of them are in concentration camps. There's no other word for it. They've been subjected to sterilization, forced abortions. They've been subjected to re-education. They've been told that they can't hold the religious beliefs that they hold. But remember that President Xi has, in Christian churches, removed the 10 Commandments and put his 10 forts in their place.
Hmm.
But people have been arrested as recently as this month. The elder of one of the big house churches, the Love Church, has been incarcerated. Pastor Wang Yi has been put in prison for 9 years because he wouldn't
Mm.
comply with the strict restrictions that are placed. And a young woman, a citizen journalist, a Christian woman who went to Wuhan to try and get the truth about COVID-19. She is now in prison for 4 years. Zhang Zhen, a
Mm.
wonderful young woman, 37 years of age, and incarcerated for
Mm.
simply wanting to establish the truth. We have to be quite clear about what President Xi's objective is to make the world safe for authoritarianism and
Mm.
authoritarians like himself.
Mm. Before I let you go, I need to get your thoughts on the renewal late last year of this Vatican-China agreement. This was incomprehensible to so many, including our friend Cardinal Joseph Zen. How is the continuation of that accord affecting the Catholic Church and the faithful in China? And might the agreement be, wittingly or unwittingly, helping to maintain and continue this crackdown and persecution of religious minorities as well as Uyghurs?
I think that is true, Raymond. It's one of the reasons why I've opposed this Concordat right from the start. And you only have to think about this historically, that in 1933, the Vatican made a Concordat with the Third Reich. And to this day, historians
Mm.
puzzle over why this was done and whether this was the wrong or right thing, and whether or not this gave respectability to all that the Nazis then went on to do in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
By contrast, if you think of the stand that Karol Wojtyla, John Paul, took in Poland, And where the church stood solidly and did not allow communists to take over control and manipulation of the church, you can see that the respect, the love, the support of the faithful was sustained. But where they collaborated or where they became too close to the state, it drained away. And I fear, as Cardinal Joseph Zen does, and after all, we're talking here about China's most distinguished and most remarkable Catholic, I think Joseph Zen is a living saint. And yet the way he has been treated and disregarded, I find appalling. I know him quite well. And it shocks me to see Hong Kong Catholics now incarcerated in prison or facing prison sentences or having to go into exile because they stand for things like the sustaining of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the article which says everyone shall be free to believe or not to believe or to change their belief. And yet we know that that is honored in its breach each and every single day in China.
No, it's an outrageous regime, and thank you for calling it out and for being on the program. We shall be in touch with you in the days ahead. Lord David Alton, thank you for being here, and you can keep up with David Alton's work at the UK House of Lords on behalf of global religious freedom by visiting him on Twitter at David Alton HL. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Raymond.